But first, there is breaking news from Washington tonight that many thought we would never see. Karl Rove will finally testify before the House Judiciary Committee about the firing of federal prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, by the Bush Justice Department. The question at hand is whether the Bush Justice Department tried to pervert federal law enforcement to serve partisan political purposes. A deal was reached earlier today whereby Mr. Rove, the former White House political advisor, and former White House counsel Harriet Miers will testify in transcribed depositions under penalty of perjury. The testimony will not be under oath, but it will be transcribed. If they lie, they are subject to perjury charges, right? It will be conducted behind closed doors for some reason. There will be no cameras, which, frankly, I got to tell you, on this show probably means that we are going to act out the transcripts using funny voices. I'm sorry. Plan ahead. Karl Rove and Harriet Miers have defied Congress so far by claiming executive privilege. Under today's agreement, they can still use that claim, but only in a significantly limited way. Honestly, I am not sure exactly what that means. We are trying to figure it out. The committee will also receive Bush White House documents related to this inquiry, and they've reserved the right to depose another person, William Kelly. He's a former White House lawyer who reportedly played a role in the U.S. attorney firings. Now, Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, John Conyers, he wins big with this announcement. This is something he has been seeking for a long time. Mr. Conyers issued the following statement today, quote, "I have long said that I would see this matter through to the end, and am encouraged that we have finally broken through the Bush administration's claims of absolute immunity. This is a victory for the separation of powers and congressional oversight. It's also a vindication of the search for truth. I am determined to have it known whether U.S. attorneys in the Department of Justice were fired for political reasons, and if so, by whom." If there are going to be prosecutions of high-ranking Bush administration officials, odds are the U.S. attorney scandal is one of the most likely catalysts for prosecutions. This is big news today. Joining us now is Newsweek's investigative correspondent, MSNBC contributor Michael Isikoff. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you, Rachel.
After resisting subpoenas for so long, did Karl Rove and Harriet Miers have a choice here, or were they forced into this?
Well, they could have continued to resist, and this would have gone to court, the Court of Appeals. They lost a big one. The Bush White House, lost a big one last year when John Bates, a George W. Bush appointed judge, ruled against the Bush White House position that White House aides like Miers and Rove didn't even have to show up when they were subpoenaed by congressional committees. That was appealed. We were facing a deadline in that Court of Appeals case. The Obama Justice Department, if this deal wasn't reached, would have had to make a filing tonight. Taking a stand on where they stood on executive privilege. And this put the Obama White House in a very uncomfortable position. They don't want to make too many concessions about executive privilege because they, like all White Houses, fear that someday some congressional committee could start issuing subpoenas to them, and they will have to testify about private concessions. On the other hand, the last thing they wanted to do was to go into court defending Harriet Miers, Karl Rove, and the Bush White House on the U.S. attorney scandal. So Greg Craig, the White House counsel, pushed very hard to get this agreement done by tonight.
Well, if concerns about executive privilege, which, as you point out, all presidents have concerns about these things, sort of regardless about their politics, because it affects the room they have to maneuver, I guess, in the executive.
Right.
Could this agreement on executive privilege with Miers and Rove spill over into any other investigations? Is this any sort of template for how that issue will be handled more broadly?
Well, the subject of these depositions are going to be the U.S. attorney scandal and the Justice Department. That's what this investigation about. That's what this is all about. But there are all sorts of tentacles and spillovers to the U.S. attorney scandal where this could lead to. I mean, look, this goes at its heart to the question of Karl Rove and what role he played at the Justice Department. We know that the first mention that we have so far of firing U.S. attorneys comes after the 2004 elections, when Karl Rove goes to Harriet Miers' office and asks the question, and we know this from internal emails that have been made public, are we going to be firing all of the U.S. attorneys or just some of them? And that leads to back and forth, continued discussions between the White House and the Justice Department about which U.S. attorneys to fire. So Rove, in effect, was the catalyst for the firing of U.S. attorneys. He then comes back into the picture almost 2 years later on in 2006, in the fall of 2006, when we know from the Justice Department's report last year, the Inspector General's report, New Mexico Republican operatives complained to Rove that David Iglesias, the U.S. attorney in New Mexico, wasn't moving fast enough on voter fraud prosecutions that Republicans in New Mexico wanted to help them, to give them electoral advantage. And also Pete Domenici, the U.S. senator, Republican senator from New Mexico, was complaining that Iglesias wasn't bringing a key indictment of corruption indictment of Democrats before the 2006 elections. After that, Iglesias, after those complaints to Rove, Iglesias gets put on the list of U.S. attorneys to be fired. That is the central issue that the House Democrats are going to be looking at in this upcoming deposition.
And briefly, Michael, that's a criminal issue.
There is also a criminal investigation going on into that very issue, the firing of David Iglesias, who is the one that is the, that is the sort of most problematic. Some of the other U.S. attorneys' firings that congressional Democrats made a big deal of 2 years ago didn't really go to the question of partisan political considerations. At least evidence to support that never turned up. But in the case of at least one, in Iglesias, it did. And I should point out that even more than Rove's testimony, what is important is 5 boxes of documents that have been sitting in Gregory Craig's office, left over from the Bush White House, internal White House emails, internal White House memos relating to the firings of these U.S. attorneys. Almost all of those documents are going to get turned over as a result of this agreement. 4 involving direct discussions with President Bush are not.
And we're out of time here, but we know that Rove and Miers aren't going to testify right away, right? They're going to go through those documents first, and the testimony is going to happen in a couple of months, probably?
Exactly.
Okay.
First, the congressional Democrats want to look at the documents, then they want to take the depositions.
Michael Isikoff, MSNBC contributor and Newsweek investigative correspondent. It is great to have your analysis and your explanation on this. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.